Hey everybody, Brigham with Drift here. In this video, 6 things I think you should know about the Yes Greats Uninc. This is not a new board. We've been riding it for a long time. Probably doesn't need another review, but I wanted to put up a review because I love this board. To me, this is an iconic board. This is the kind of board that if you love snowboarding, you should have one of these. Before I get into all those details, check out my specs and my biases below so you know where I'm coming from as a rider. We own the boards we talk about, get them in a variety of conditions, and then we let you know what we think. The first thing you need to know, if you don't already, if you don't recognize this pig logo in the Uninc label, you need to get on Google and look that up and find out what that's all about. That comes from the 3 founders of Yes, 3 legends of snowboarding, DCP, Roman DeMarchi, and JP Solberg. These are guys that I was watching over and over and over about 20 years ago, working in a shop, paying for college. They were pushing the limits of snowboarding. They were with Burton. They broke off to form Yes. I'm not going to tell you the whole story here, but you can look that up and find out what that's all about, and you should. Those guys are legit, and they've been really cool to us here at Drift, so big shout out to those guys. Second thing you should know is that when you're looking at sizes, just know that this ride's a little bigger than the sizes might indicate, and that's for 2 reasons. One is the tip and tail are pretty blunt, so you don't have a lot of extra length after the contact points. So for the size, the effective edge is pretty long. So I know for me, when I look at like a play board or a freestyle or park board, there's kind of a sweet spot for me for effective edge. If it's too long, I don't like it. If it's too short, I don't like it either. So take a look at that. Make sure you're kind of hitting that zone where the feel of the board on the snow isn't going to feel too long to you. Because for a 159, this can feel like somebody else's board that's going to be labeled probably like a 162 or a 163. The other thing that makes it ride a little bigger is the mid-bite tech, and that's where Yes makes the board a bunch narrower between the feet with an abrupt step down on both edges, and you can see it and feel it. I'll talk about more about what that does in a minute, but it makes it so that the board is wider underfoot than you might think it would be looking at the waist width. So you're going to want to look at that number too. I love that extra width. As a guy with big feet especially, and I think if you're worried about it, just do it. You'll get used to it. It has its benefits, but you need to look at those 2 things. Make sure you get the right size. The cool thing is, depending on the size, you can kind of change the personality of this board. For me, this is the 159. This size I ride a little bit more like an all-mountain board. I can push it pretty hard carving. I can go pretty fast. I love practicing switch on this size. I can spin it and I can butter it, but the 156 is a lot more playful for me. That one's more fun to spin, more fun to butter, more fun to mess around on, but I can't push it as hard. And I really like both sizes. Third thing you should know, to me as a intermediate to advanced freestyle board, this has the perfect amount of camber and rocker and just past medium flex. There's quite a bit of camber here, so don't be fooled. This thing is no park noodle. This is a board you can push pretty hard. There's really only a pretty small section of rocker, just a couple inches before you reach the contact point, so it's mostly camber. It makes it so it's a board you can push pretty hard, and it's not the most approachable, but there's just enough forgiveness there for spinning, for ride and switch and stuff, that even though you can push it hard, you can play around on it. It's not going to kick you to the curb. That brings me to number 4. Because of all that kind of combined together, this is a freestyle board, right? It's a true twin, but it veers into that all mountain territory because it's so capable beyond just playing around with it. So you can go fast, you can get into the crud, and it handles all of that pretty well. This is a board you can kind of use everywhere, and I actually got the opportunity to follow DCP, one of the owners of Yes, ride this board for a couple laps of Snow Basin, and he just did everything I think we all wish we could do with an all-mountain board, just ripping carves, popping off of side hits and doing little spins, ride and switch a bunch. He just kind of did a little bit of everything, and of course made this thing look awesome. So it's kind of cool because it is a freestyle board, but I think you can ride it beyond freestyle. And there's really two more areas in that regard that I want to talk about. One where it really shines, and the one spot where it doesn't. That brings me to number 5. Yes, we'll say this is the best carving twin out there. I haven't ridden every twin in the world, so I can't say for sure, but this is very fun to carve. And that's a combo of this stiff-ish flex for a freestyle board, a decent amount of camber, the mid-bite tech, where these edge disruptions help this thing lock in on firm snow. I love how it feels. That wider width underfoot, which allows you to lay it over further. And then the last thing is that this is an asymmetrical twin. And that means that the hillside edge has a deeper side cut, meant to cater specifically to hillside turns. And that's part of why this is a true twin. That way, if you're regular or goofy, you can ride it, and you want to make sure that you have your hillside on the hillside of the board. It's got a toe side and a hillside specifically. That's what it means to be asymmetrical. And if you've never ridden one, you should. It's not insane, but it's pretty cool. This is fun to carve. I do need to note, it's not a carving board. It's a freestyle board that's really fun to carve. You can push it, but you're not going to compare it to like the Karua Cafe Racer or a Nitro Pantera or a Jones Free Carver. If you want a carving board, get a carving board. But if you want a freestyle board and you want to do a little bit of everything with it and be able to play around with it, but also rail on good groomers, this is really cool and a lot of fun. I think it's a really good dad board for that reason, even if you're not sending it in the park and doing cool big jumps and big tricks. The 6th thing I'll mention, this is the one area where this is going to fall short for you as you kind of push it as an all-mountain board, and that's that this is not going to shine in powder. And that's because of everything that I've talked about already. It's just not what this board is meant to cater to. You have mostly camber, a very small amount of rocker, and very short twin nose and tail. So it's just not going to give you a lot of float. Centered stance, you don't have any setback inserts, there's no taper. So nothing about this says, directional powder. If you want a board that feels very similar, but does better in the powder, then you're going to want to look at the standard. The standard is a very similar profile, mostly camber, a little bit of rocker, but it has a lower volume tail and a higher volume nose. It has a little bit of setback, and it has setback inserts. So you can make that board much more directional. The cool thing about the standard, and that's another one of my favorites from Yes, is that it feels like a twin. It is a twin basically on firm snow. On a groomer, it's a twin. But when you get into the powder, it can feel more directional. The trade-off there is going to be that it's still going to be pretty fun to carve, but not quite to the level of this with the asymmetrical side cut and all that. But otherwise, very similar feel, and I love that board. You know that if you've watched that review. So those are my thoughts about the Yes Greats Uninc. Definitely a fave. Highly recommend checking it out. Hit me up below with your comments and questions, and we'll see you in the next video.